Before I talk about this strange cow, I wanted to talk about the mate emoji real quick. I know you'll be talking about it later with Jenny.
Yeah.
But can you tell us a little bit about what you had to do? How long was your proposal for the mate? What did it look like?
We took a lot of time, a couple of months, and the most difficult task we had, lo más difícil, was to decide which was going to be the cup, because we check the Uruguayan cup, how the Syrians drink mate, how the Paraguayans use another cup that is called wampa, how the Brazilians use another type of cup that is called cuilla. And we are not only having problems of cups, but also of color of yerba mate, because Brazilians and Uruguayans drink mate after it has been harvested, and Paraguayans, Argentinians, and Uruguayans drink mate after 2 years of letting rest the yerba, so it's much darker. So it was very difficult to choose which was going to be the essence of our emoji.
It took a lot of work to build the standards.
Yes, a lot.
A lot of research.
Yes.
You had to figure out what the standard would look like and then make a recommendation to the Unicode Symposium.
Yes, that
Right.
was.
Right. And so I know you'll be talking about it more, but the mate emoji is a nice example of what I want to talk about today and explain what this cow is about, but about what the importance of standards. Because what we're doing with the Credibility Coalition is thinking about standards for content credibility online. But to just go back a little bit, I want to talk about food. Because I'm sure many of us are familiar with food standards and nutrition labels. But how many of us have lived on a farm or spent time with a farm? Yeah, so my grandmother was a farmer, and you had a cow or you had a pig, and it might have looked different depending on where you are. But you had a cow, and you knew what kind of grass it ate, right? You knew exactly what it consumed, and so when you killed the cow, you knew what kind of meat you were eating. You knew the quality of your food, and so you knew the kind of pipeline that led to your body. You knew that you knew the quality of the grass, you knew the quality of the cow, you knew where it grew up, you knew how it spent its time, and then you knew what you were eating, putting inside your body. And it was good, right? But then something changed. For those of us living in cities, the industrialization of food has created distance between all this kind of modes of production. And so those who are developing the grains ship them on trucks, and those who are developing, who are raising the livestock, will ship those on trucks. The kind of chain is very different, and then that will be shipped in boxes. It'll go to a store, then you have to drive to the store, and then you have to figure out what you're eating and what you're putting inside your body. And so you didn't know, especially at the beginning, you didn't know if what you were eating was good or if it was not so good. And so you had questions. And so, early on in the early industrialization of food in the United States, there was a lot of misleading food. There's a lot of poor quality food out there, and people had very difficult time understanding what the quality of the food was and how to have a conversation about it. And so we developed standards. We developed ways of inspecting the process throughout the full chain. We developed kind of expertise around this. And so from there, we got nutrition labels. It's a very breezy introduction to nutrition labels. But it was through nutrition labels that we started to be able to have a conversation and understand what exactly was going on inside our food. So in the United States, this is what nutrition labels look like. You can see that there are different kind of ways that they're designed. There are different words and terms. And so to understand what cholesterol is or what sodium is or what a carbohydrate is, you have to know what that is first. But then once you understand that, then you can kind of understand what exactly is inside the food. In the United Kingdom, there's a slightly different design, but they use color coding and they use different styles. But you can see they're emphasizing a lot of similar things: the fats, the calories, the servings. And then I was looking at this one when I was drinking my very healthy Pepsi here in Argentina with the nutrition label, and you can see again a lot of similarities. And so, regardless of where you are in the world, with the food that you're consuming, even though there are differences across the world with different styles of nutrition labels, you can see some commonalities. And so you can make evaluations and judgments about what you are consuming. And so why did we need nutrition labels? It was the decontextualization of food. It was the loss of context in food production that required the emergence of nutrition labels. And systems of assessment and for third-party assessment of how food is produced. And so it's through nutrition labels that we start to understand, that reintroduce the context of how the food is produced and what's there. And it's not just nutrition labels, of course. There are organic labels, there are kosher labels. There are many ways that we label our foods to understand the context in which it's produced, because we don't know that context anymore. This is happening now with information. There's a rising tide of vaccine skepticism in the United States, in Europe, throughout the world, that is leading to a number of public health outbreaks. This is one study that we looked at with the Credibility Coalition, it's a Johns Hopkins researcher releases shocking report on flu vaccines, shared over 1 million times across social media. It's just one of many articles and memes and videos that raise skepticism about vaccines. It turns out this researcher is not an expert in vaccines, but is an anthropologist. And it turns out that a lot of vaccine misinformation is built largely off of one study that was conducted and debunked many years ago, but then has been decontextualized and then repackaged and then spread throughout the internet. And this study links the idea that vaccines cause autism and can now be connected to over tens of thousands of cases of measles throughout the world because of rising skepticism about vaccines. So again, the decontextualization of information of that scientific journal, the fact that it's very difficult to understand when and how it was conducted, that it was debunked, and then how it's been then proliferated across the internet through memes, videos, articles, is a contributing factor, not the only factor, but a contributing factor in the rising vaccine skepticism around the world. And so this raises a question, and this is a question we're going to work through in the workshop that I'll do with Dwight Nell this afternoon at 4 o'clock. Is to ask a question, what might a nutrition label look like for information quality? What are the basic building blocks? When you think about the emphasis on calories versus sugars, what are the things you want to redesign and emphasize? What are the things that really matter? If you're Jewish and you're thinking about kosher labels, is it more about the social relationship you have with your rabbi? These are big questions, and it's very difficult, as Flor noted with the mate emoji, to find a standard. It's going to take a while, but we want to do a design thinking workshop to really think through that and what that looks like. And this is not a new idea, just to emphasize. Sally Lehrman at the Trust Project has built a series of what she calls trust indicators that a publication can apply to itself to communicate to readers and then have that data expressed through platforms. And she analogizes that to nutrition labels. Amy Webb, who's a futurist, has talked about how articles could have transparent labels. This is where the information came from, who touched the story. This is truthiness, this is verification, it could be automated. There are different ways that we might standardize that process to make this content more clear. And Matt Stempek at the Civic Media Center even had a really kind of conceptual design about nutrition facts. And so you can see here the time it might take. You can see the opinion time that's in the article. Is it 30% partisan, 36% partisan rhetoric, 22% advertising, 2% cited sources? It was a speculation at the time. He made it back in 2011. But he brought up an important point, is that the rollout of nutrition labels on food packaging, it didn't force individuals to eat differently, but it provided critical dietary information for those consumers who sought it. So it's a nice balance between kind of censoring, becoming the thought police of the internet, and the other extreme, which is the misinformation proliferating on the web, is that maybe providing context can be a way to kind of strike this balance and provide a more kind of healthier options for the content online. And so what can standards about information quality help us accomplish? It's a question that I think we've thought through with nutrition, and it's still an unsolved problem, as I demonstrated with the Pepsi photo. But it's a provocation that I think we're going to discuss this afternoon, is to think about what standards can accomplish. Here are a few real-world use cases. If you open up Google and you search Hillary Clinton emails, you might come across a few articles that are from sites like PolitiFact or Snopes, where you can see something called schema.org. So you see the claim, you can see it's claimed by, and you can see a fact check. And so this is a data standard that allows certain participating organizations to have that data expressed on the platform so that readers can see more context even before they get to the article. On Facebook, they now have a feature where if you're sharing this information, the known information, misinformation. It places related articles in context for you to understand what else is out there. And so these articles come from international fact-checking network signatories who can then, whose articles can appear alongside. If you do a search for symptoms of, say, yellow fever, and you get a knowledge panel that shows up on the right-hand side. I tried this in Spanish, and the results are in English. So it's not quite perfect, but the idea is there is that you can get structured information within the platform. And it's not just about information, it's also about drivers, for instance, in Uber. Again, would take, when you're stepping into a cab, you have a decontextualized person. You don't know who they are, how to trust them, what kind of rides they've taken, and so you have a standard of information. And so this is our work with the Credibility Coalition. We're an initiative that's Meedan and Hacks Hackers. And you can learn more about us on social media at Cred Coalition. And I'm also a writer and researcher and publishing a book about internet memes and social movements. So this afternoon at 4 o'clock, we'll talk a little bit about our process with the Credibility Coalition, how we do annotation, kind of the initial structure that we've developed. But we're really keen to get feedback from everyone here to start thinking about what are the standards for third-party assessment of quality content. What does that look like? How can we design that? And is there a possibility of a global standard, or do we need to be thinking more regionally? So thank you very much, and I hope to see you this afternoon at 4 o'clock. Thank you.